On the 30th of May 1966, 6RAR, after 12 months in Vietnam, was to board HMAS Sydney, the Vung Tau ferry as it was called, an aircraft carrier, to return to Australia. Here we've got the United States liaison signallers who were controlling the helicopters for the move from Nui Dat directly onto the deck of HMAS Sydney in Vung Tau Harbour. When the Navy officer had come to talk about the move, I'd asked the question, could we do it by Chinook onto the deck of Sydney? And he went back to Australia and all the tests were done on the deck, and we were told that we could do it. So 5RAR just before us, and then 6RAR moved directly from Nui Dat onto the deck of Sydney, which saved an enormous amount of fiddling around going by truck or and then by barge out to Sydney. There's the carrier arriving in Vung Tau Harbour. It didn't want to stay in the harbour very long, so it came in and just before we started to board it. This is on the quarterdeck of the carrier, below the flight deck aft. And finally, I had a moment to think and rest and look at what was going on around me and to see the Navy doing all the hard work. I don't know how occupational health and safety would view this sort of practice by the sailors in those days, pulling the boat over by his feet. But they were very different days then. A couple of the naval officers on the quarterdeck. Some river barges alongside a couple of US naval landing ships. The quarterdeck was reserved for officers, and it was a great place for us to relax. Also the flight deck on the way home when it wasn't being used for sun tanning. The Sydney was equipped with Wessex helicopters, which were there for general purpose use and also for anti-submarine use. They would hover in one spot ahead of the aircraft carrier and its other ships with a device lowered down under the water so it could listen for submarines. And on the day we were landing, they were getting ready to operate as we left Vung Tau Harbour. Here we are going out of Vung Tau. For the last time, I thought, and looking back on it all, and I can't tell you the relief I had when I got onto that ship, passing some dhows, going about their business, whether it be fishing or some other devious business, and Vung Tau fading away into the distance. And we were farewelled by one US Army helicopter, which fired off all its machine guns as it passed over us. One of our escorts, the frigate HMAS Stuart, and we were later to be joined by a daring class destroyer, HMAS Duchess. Duchess had been a replacement from the Royal Navy to replace the ship that HMAS Melbourne, the other aircraft carrier, had cut in half off Jervis Bay. The destroyer escorts carried out all sorts of manoeuvres and exercises with the aircraft carrier, but whilst we were in unfriendly waters north of Indonesia, the helicopters were always ahead, dipping their Doppler, I think, gear into the sea to listen for submarines. At this stage, we were confrontasi between Indonesia and Malaysia was still ongoing, and Australia, being an ally of Malaysia, we weren't quite at war with Indonesia, but we were sort of in a state of being unfriendly. The naval guy dressed up with life jacket and diving equipment was a lifeguard who was always on duty 24 hours a day on the quarterdeck, and he was the man overboard guard. Second Lieutenant David Sabin there, one of the platoon commanders from Long Tan. Yes, the lifeguard on the quarterdeck was there to jump overboard if anybody went overboard, and he was to bob around in the sea and try and find them, whilst the aircraft carrier dropped rafts, boats, and tried to turn around to come back and pick them all up. Not a job I would have liked particularly, I must say. HMAS Stuart zigging and zagging in our wake. And on the horizon, I think the Royal Navy's replenishment ship coming up, or maybe HMAS Duchess. Stuart doing some target practice. We were blessed with good weather all the way home, which was good. And there you can see our wake as we zigged and zagged as well. We didn't do any training on the way back to Australia. We'd had enough of all that. And the guys just relaxed. That's the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Oleander, RFA Oleander, out of Singapore, which had come to replenish our ship and Stuart. Some of the young sailors on the flag deck, they were as young as 16 actually. A great life for a young bloke. We're very well looked after on HMAS Sydney, and the Navy did their very best to entertain us, look after us, give us good food, and there was a fairly liberal beer ration. Here we are now coming up to Oleander with its helicopter landing platform and hangars. This Royal Navy ship, which was actually an auxiliary ship, was based in Singapore. The battalion had been asked if we wanted to actually go to Singapore on the first day out of Vietnam and Sydney to be replenished there and the soldiers to go on leave. But the CO and I thought that that wouldn't be a good idea, letting the soldiers loose in Singapore a day out of Vietnam. So we decided we'd get the Royal Navy to come out and replenish Sydney and Stewart at sea on the way back. And this actually gave us a spare day, which we used up when we got into the Barrier Reef to stop, anchor alongside a beautiful lagoon, and the troops and the sailors lowered the boats and we all went fishing for the day. Later on, the Navy were queried why the aircraft carrier stopped for a day for people to go fishing. But I think they got a fairly sharp answer to that. I wonder if in these days one could casually sort of move ships around after having a discussion between a Navy officer and an Army major. Probably not. The crew on Oleander. There's the lifeguard. Thankfully, he wasn't needed on the trip home. And here we've got the daring class destroyer Duchess joining us. One of the last of the classic destroyer shapes before they all went modern. I think it might also have had an open bridge. Duchess coming up on the other side of Oleander for replenishment. This is not a manoeuvre I'd like to see being done in heavy seas, I must say. And Oleander departs for Singapore. Duchess putting on a turn of speed. This voyage was a great wind down. After 12 months in Vietnam, it really gave the guys, quite a period of relaxation. So they weren't just straight out of the line at Nui Dat, bang, back home into Sydney, Brisbane or wherever. Yes, it has got an open bridge. And this was what went on for several days across the top of Indonesia. No doubt the Navy were doing things that navies do. They never sort of stayed in a straight line. That was Major Peter Smeaton walking towards us there. He'd been the OC of Support Company in Vietnam and the operations officer. Would we have come through the Lombok Strait? I'm not sure, but that's Indonesia there on the horizon, or parts thereof. There are the guys on the gun sponsons, which was a favourite spot to be, sticking out from the side of the ship over the water. Plenty of breeze. Lovely view, nice seats. And the Navy band and the 6RAR band entertaining the officers, as was right and proper. Pity the film doesn't have sound. All these things were so much of a relief. Now, this is an exercise that was carried out a jackstay transfer between the carrier and HMAS Stuart. I was asked if I'd like to go across to Stuart by that method, and I said I thought it was terribly interesting and fascinating thing to be doing, but thank you very much, and I wouldn't actually take part, as I thought other people probably deserved to go more than me. And they swallowed that. No doubt the chef down below trying to prepare lunch wouldn't have been very pleased about those sort of manoeuvres. Stuart coming up alongside. This is taken from the flag bridge, the flag deck. I think now we're going to see the actual transfer. Yes, here we go. I think Major Harry Smith actually went across. A much braver man than me. I think this sort of thing is like jumping out of aeroplanes, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, it all went well. Everybody had a good time, and I got some film of it. Back to doing what we really were getting used to doing. Nobody seemed to get sunburnt, which always surprised me, because they hadn't exposed their lower limbs to the sun for 12 months up to this stage. And here we got the Navy chipping rust off the deck and doing some repairs. One of my young officers there, National Service officer. And Duchess. Looks like we're going to do the same thing with Duchess. The guy on the left shoots a rifle with the line on it, and that's how they get the line across. And here comes the harness. Seas are a bit rougher now. that signal flying from the masthead had something to do with the fact that the ship was not in a position to manoeuvre because it was tied to the adjoining ship. Now, this is on the deck of Sydney at dawn on the day that we arrived off Darwin. And that's a helicopter, an RAAF helicopter from mainland Australia, bringing mail to our ship. And you can see how beautifully polished and clean it is compared to the choppers we'd been using in Vietnam. And that's part of Australia you can see there in the distance. Not sure which bit. It wouldn't have been Darwin town, I wouldn't think. Must have been some other outlying island. And from here on we head down the Barrier Reef. I think they should all be rested, or were all rested by now. Ready to go back into the marches and welcome homes by their families and the people on the streets. We got a very, very good welcome in Brisbane. And from there, all the national servicemen dispersed, and we mostly didn't see them again unless they came to reunions.